Kindly help us to like, comment and subscribe to the channel for more of this. Sarah Thomas had always been close to her father. At 28 she worked as a financial advisor in Chicago, but no amount of distance could change how she felt about her dad, Mark Thomas. He was the kind of father who never missed a school play or softball game, the one who taught her how to change a tire before she learned how to drive. Sarah adored him. So when he started talking more often about his dream of visiting the Italian village where his grandfather was born, she made a quiet promise to herself. For his 60th birthday she would give him something unforgettable. She spent 2 years saving, every bonus, every extra dollar, until she had just over $56,000 set aside for the perfect surprise family trip to Italy. But on a bright Tuesday morning, that dream began to crumble. Sarah stood on her parents' front porch, suitcase in hand, ready to share last-minute trip details. Instead, her mother opened the door with a smirk and said words that felt like a slap. "We've all agreed, Sarah. You're not welcome at your dad's birthday party." Sarah blinked, trying to understand. That sentence would change everything. Sarah had always felt like an outsider in her own family. Growing up in Denver, she saw how different her relationship was with her parents compared to her older brother, Jake. Her mom, Diane, always had time for Jake. There were pictures on every wall. Diane and Jake laughing, hugging, celebrating wins. Meanwhile, Sarah and her dad stood off to the side, always close but separate from the rest. Diane wasn't mean outright, but she always overlooked Sarah. Forgotten birthdays. Ignored report cards. "Why can't you be more like Jake?" was something Sarah heard all the time. Jake, 4 years older, could do no wrong. Star athlete, top of his class and now a big-time lawyer. Even when Sarah graduated from a top university and got her first job at a financial firm, Diane simply replied, "That's nice, sweetie. Jake just got promoted again." Over time, Sarah gave up trying to impress her mother. But her bond with her father only grew stronger. Things changed suddenly last year when Mark had a mild heart attack. The moment Sarah got the news, she flew home and took 3 weeks off to help during his recovery. Diane wasn't happy. "You're throwing off our routine," she muttered more than once. But Mark smiled every time Sarah walked into the room, grateful for her presence. Sitting with him, seeing how fragile he suddenly seemed, something in Sarah shifted. That's when she made up her mind. She would give him the gift of a lifetime for his 60th birthday. A trip to Italy where his grandfather had been born. Sarah worked overtime, cut back on every non-essential and watched her savings grow. She even opened a separate account and named it Dad's Dream. By spring she had just over $56,000 set aside. She couldn't wait to see his face when he stepped onto the land of his roots. 6 months before his birthday, Sarah pitched the trip idea over family dinner. "A week in Italy. I found a villa in a small town called Monteverde. It's close to the village where Grandpa Leo was born," she explained. Mark's face lit up with boyish excitement. "You're serious?" he asked, eyes wide. "You'd really do that for me?" Jake nodded and said, "Sounds cool." His wife, Anna, mentioned how she'd always wanted to visit a vineyard. Even Diane seemed surprisingly agreeable, asking questions about flights and schedules. Sarah left that night feeling hopeful. Maybe, just maybe, this trip would bring them closer. She dove into planning. The villa was perfect. Old stone walls, wide open views of green hills, and enough space for the whole family. The owners, an elderly couple named the Biancos, were thrilled about welcoming an American family with Italian roots. "Your father will feel at home here," Mrs. Bianco said during their video call. Sarah's eyes welled up. She imagined her father walking down cobbled streets, tasting olive oil made from the same trees his grandfather once tended. But as weeks passed, Sarah started noticing changes. Diane became strangely cold whenever Sarah mentioned the trip. Jake stopped replying to her messages about travel plans. When he did, his answers were vague, "Whatever works." Anna barely responded at all. Sarah brushed off her worries. "This is for Dad," she reminded herself. Surely once they arrived, everything would come together. But Diane's little interruptions piled up. "Oh, you were stopping by today? I forgot," she'd say, greeting Sarah with guests already filling the living room. "We'll talk later about Italy." Later never came. Still, Sarah held on to hope. The trip was about love, about family history, about fulfilling her father's dream. Nothing else mattered. Or so she thought. By February, Sarah had officially turned her apartment into Italy Planning Central. Maps of Tuscany were taped to the walls, sticky notes covered her fridge, and piles of travel books lay scattered across the coffee table. She had booked a cooking class, a walking tour of Siena, and even a family olive oil tasting with distant relatives, the Ricci family who still lived near her great-grandfather's village. "Your father will be very proud," said Luca Ricci over a video call, holding up old photos of Mark's grandfather. "We still remember the day Antonio left for America." Sarah smiled through tears. This wasn't just a trip. It was a journey through time. She imagined Mark standing on those village streets holding the same records she now held copies of. This would be the gift of a lifetime. But something didn't feel right. Diane had started making quiet comments during their phone calls. "You know your father doesn't like too much fuss," she said. "He might prefer something simpler." Sarah frowned. "A quiet garden party isn't the same as walking through our family's history," she replied. Diane's voice stayed calm but firm. "He's not as young as he used to be, Sarah. This much travel might be too much." Meanwhile, Jake became even harder to reach. He stopped answering phone calls and responded to texts with one-word replies. "Sounds fine." "Sure. If you say so." Anna kept her distance too. "Whatever you plan will be nice," she offered once without looking up from her phone. Only Mark kept the excitement alive. "Buongiorno," he'd say with a big grin every time Sarah called. "I'm learning Italian." Fully. Very slowly. 3 months before the birthday, Diane invited Sarah over for dinner. "We should all talk about summer plans," she'd said. Sarah arrived with Italian coffee, guidebooks, and a folder of printed tickets. But as soon as she stepped inside, she noticed the strange atmosphere. Jake and Anna were already there, talking quietly with Diane. They stopped the moment Sarah walked in. "We were just going over a few ideas," Diane said, her voice too sweet. Throughout dinner, every time Sarah tried to bring up the Italy trip, the conversation shifted. "More potatoes?" "Jake, tell that story about court last week." Mark, eager to talk about Tuscany, was repeatedly cut off by Diane. After dessert, Sarah took a call in the hallway, and that's when she overheard something that changed everything. In the kitchen, Diane's voice floated through the air, low but sharp. "She's hijacking his birthday," she said to Jake. "Always acting like she knows what's best for him." Jake replied, "It's been like this for years. Dad and Sarah in their own little world. We need to do something before she books everything." Sarah felt her heart drop. She leaned against the wall, the phone call forgotten. Their words weren't just about a birthday trip. They were about resentment. She had thought this was about love. They thought it was about control. That night, she drove home in silence, the folder of Italy plans sitting unopened on the passenger seat. Her thoughts swirled. Was she being selfish? Was she pushing a dream that no one else shared? But when her dad called the next day and asked excitedly, "Did you book the pasta class yet?" she knew the truth. This wasn't about her. This was for him. Determined to stay focused, Sarah pushed forward. But Diane and Jake's resistance became harder to ignore. Passive-aggressive comments turned into open disagreement. "He's just being polite," Jake told her during a rare phone call. "He doesn't want to hurt your feelings." Sarah could hardly believe what she was hearing. "You think Dad's pretending to be excited? You think I don't know my own father?" Jake was quiet, then added, "We just want what's best for him." The worst part wasn't their words. It was how they made Mark sound like a fragile old man instead of the sharp, energetic person he still was. He was an engineering professor who climbed stairs daily and walked to work. But suddenly Sarah's gift was being painted as a burden. The tension simmered. Something had to give. And soon. In early March, Diane sent a text asking Sarah to come over and talk about the birthday plans. Sarah felt a flicker of hope. Maybe they were finally ready to be supportive. She packed her travel folder and brought a bottle of Italian wine for a celebratory toast. But when she pulled up to the house, she saw Jake's car already parked outside. That was odd. He usually texted before coming over. As Sarah stepped through the front door, she saw them all seated in the living room. Diane, Jake, and Anna, like a panel waiting to deliver a verdict. "Where's Dad?" she asked, noticing his absence. "Golf league," Diane replied too quickly. "We thought we'd speak first." Red flag. Sarah took a seat at the edge of the couch, her stomach already sinking. "We've been thinking," Diane began, "that something local would be more appropriate for your father's birthday." Jake jumped in, his voice professional. We've talked it through. A local event makes more sense, easier for everyone. Easier for everyone except Dad, Sarah replied, trying to stay calm. He's been counting down the days to Italy. Anna avoided eye contact. Dan shook her head. Your father's being polite. He doesn't want to hurt your feelings. Sarah stared at her mother. That's not true. He's been learning Italian. Diane dismissed it. It's just a phase. He'll forget about it. But Sarah wouldn't forget. She had already invested her heart, and thousands of dollars. I've already paid deposits on everything, Sarah said, voice shaking. The villa. The cooking class. The vineyard tour. Everything's booked. Jake gave her a look. If this is about money, it's not, Sarah interrupted. It's about what Dad wants. Diane leaned forward. We know what's best for your father. Do you? Sarah snapped. Did you ask him? No one answered. The silence screamed volumes. Sarah exhaled. What if we did both? A small party here and then the trip. Diane and Jake exchanged glances. We'll think about it, Diane said, her voice cold. But Sarah knew what that really meant. That night, as Sarah drove home, her thoughts spun in circles. Was she crazy? Was she the only one who actually cared about what Mark wanted? She called him directly, something she rarely did. Hey sweetheart, he said, surprised. Everything okay? Yeah, she said softly. Just checking in about the Italy trip. Are you still excited? Mark chuckled. Are you kidding? I've been boring everyone at work with vineyard facts. Professor Gray threatened to move offices if I show him one more olive tree photo. Sarah laughed with relief. So you're still up for it? Absolutely, Mark said. Why? Did someone say otherwise? Sarah hesitated. Not exactly. Just wondering. His reply came firm. Tell whoever's worried that I'm more than capable of walking through Italy with my daughter. That was all the confirmation Sarah needed. The next morning, a message from Diane popped up. We've discussed further. The local party is moving ahead. We'll talk about your trip idea later. Your trip idea. As if Mark's dream had suddenly become Sarah's fantasy. Calls went unanswered. Texts were met with cold, clipped replies. Diane's favorite weapon, silence, was back in play. Over the next week, Sarah's determination turned into doubt. Was she being selfish? Was she imagining resistance that wasn't there? Then even Mark became harder to reach. His responses turned vague. Distracted. Something had shifted. Sarah needed clarity. What she found instead was a door slammed in her face. Literally and emotionally. One Saturday afternoon, Sarah decided to stop by unannounced. She picked up pastries from her dad's favorite bakery as a peace offering. But as she turned onto her parents' street, her stomach dropped. Cars filled both sides of the road. Aunt Lisa's sedan, Uncle Frank's truck, even Cousin Ben's van from 2 states away. A family gathering. One she hadn't been told about. Sarah parked around the corner and walked slowly toward the house, pastries in hand, heart pounding. She rang the bell instead of using her key. Her cousin Lily answered. Sarah. I didn't know you were coming. Apparently no one did, Sarah replied, stepping inside. The house was transformed. Banners read Mark's 60th birthday bash. Decorations were already up. Aunts and uncles huddled in corners, reviewing catering menus. Diane emerged from the kitchen holding a tray of coffee cups. She froze when she saw Sarah. You weren't expected, she said flatly. Clearly, Sarah replied. What's going on? Planning your father's birthday, Diane said casually. We didn't think you'd be interested, what with your alternative plans. You mean the trip I've spent 2 years preparing? Diane set the tray down with a clatter. We've already made our decision. Sarah's voice trembled. Without me. Diane didn't answer. Sarah followed Diane into the kitchen, where cake samples and menus covered the counter. Why wasn't I included? She asked. Diane didn't meet her eyes. We didn't think you'd be interested in helping with something you opposed. I never opposed anything, Sarah snapped. I planned something for Dad, not against anyone else. Diane crossed her arms. You always think you're the only one who knows what's best. Like you're the perfect daughter. Sarah's heart pounded. This isn't about me. It's about what would make Dad happy. And that's having everyone together here, Diane said coldly. Not some stressful trip across the world. Sarah's voice dropped. You didn't even ask him. We know what he needs, Diane snapped, slamming her hand on the counter. Cake samples jumped. We're having the party here. End of story. Sarah stared at her mother. What about Italy? Diane's face hardened. There is no Italy, Sarah. It's not happening. The words hit like a brick. The kitchen fell silent. From the other room, voices hushed. Everyone had heard. Sarah stood frozen, pain flooding every corner of her body. Where's Dad? She asked quietly. Diane hesitated. Out. Running errands. Sarah narrowed her eyes. He left his phone? Sarah pulled out her phone and called Mark. The familiar ringtone echoed inside the house. Probably from the study. Diane stiffened. He forgot it. The lie was too obvious. I think I'll wait for him, Sarah said, pulling out a kitchen chair. Diane's mask of control cracked. There's no need for that. We're busy. I'll wait, Sarah repeated, folding her arms. 10 minutes later, Jake appeared in the doorway. Sarah, he said with fake surprise. Didn't expect you. Apparently no one did, Sarah replied. Funny how that keeps happening. Jake sat beside her, lowering his voice. Look, this isn't personal. It's just easier if we plan separately. Too many disagreements. Disagreements? Sarah said, incredulous. You mean I actually considered what Dad wants? Jake looked annoyed. You always do this. Act like you're the only one who cares. Sarah's voice rose. Because I'm the only one who listened. Diane stepped in. Enough. You're ruining everything. Sarah stood. No. You already did that. I want the truth. Why am I being pushed out of my own father's birthday? The room had gone silent again, all eyes on them. Diane's voice turned low and sharp. You want the truth? Fine. You're not welcome at your father's birthday party. Gasps echoed around the room. Someone dropped a plate. Sarah's chest tightened. Why? She asked quietly. Diane's smirk returned. Because it's not about you. Sarah stared at her mother, seeing a side of her she'd tried to ignore for years. The bitterness. The control. Got it, she said calmly. Then she turned, walked past her shocked relatives and left without another word. In her car, hands shaking, Sarah made 3 calls. First, to cancel the villa in Monteverde. Second, to cancel the tours and flights. Third, to move the entire $56,000 back to her personal account. With every cancellation, a piece of her dream crumbled. But beneath the sadness, something else stirred. Freedom. This wasn't just the end of a trip. It was the end of her chasing approval from people who never intended to give it. She sent one final text to her dad. I love you. I'm sorry I won't be at your birthday. Someday I hope you understand why. Then she blocked every number, except his. Sarah's apartment had never felt so empty. Her minimalist space, usually peaceful, now felt cold. She opened the bottle of Italian wine she'd been saving for the trip. She drank it alone, sitting on her balcony watching the city lights blur. At 9:30 p.m. her doorbell rang. It was Emma, her best friend since college, holding a paper bag. Chocolate, wine and ice cream, she said, walking in. Your text sounded like a disaster. Sarah laughed weakly. You have no idea. For the next 2 hours Sarah poured everything out. Emma listened without interruption. When Sarah finally finished, Emma leaned forward. What if you still went? To Italy? Yes. Not for them. For you. Sarah shook her head. That feels selfish. Emma raised an eyebrow. Sarah. You've been putting everyone else first your whole life. You saved for 2 years. Took time off. Did all the work. Why not go anyway? Sleep in, drink wine at lunch, flirt with charming locals. No family drama. Sarah hesitated. The idea felt impossible, and yet freeing. She stared at her laptop. Emma grinned. Come on. Let's just look. They opened the travel site together, and for the first time in days Sarah felt a flicker of hope. By midnight the plan was in motion. Sarah and Emma had booked a cozy 1-bedroom apartment in a hilltop town just outside Florence. Nothing fancy, just stone walls, a small terrace and a view of the vineyards. This is your reset button, Emma said as Sarah confirmed her flight. Not revenge. Not escape. Just you. The next morning, Sarah emailed her job to reconfirm her time off, packed her bags and wrote one handwritten letter to Mark. She couldn't bear the thought of him not knowing the truth. She mailed it express delivery, no return address, just in case Diane intercepted it. Then she turned off her phone and boarded a plane for Rome. Italy welcomed Sarah with soft sunlight, warm pastries, and a quiet peace she hadn't felt in years. She wandered through cobbled streets with no itinerary, no family obligations and no pressure. She sipped espresso at street cafes, visited tiny bookstores and smiled at strangers who didn't know her name or her history. In Monteverde she found the olive groves her great-grandfather once worked. The Ricci family welcomed her like a long-lost cousin, showing her weathered photo albums and cooking pasta by hand. "Your father would have loved this," Luca said, placing an old photo of Antonio in her hand. "And someday," Sarah replied, "he still will." On her 5th day in Italy, Sarah woke to find 3 missed calls and 1 voicemail from Mark. He had received the letter. "I had no idea what you planned, Sarah." His voice trembled. "Your mother, she lied to all of us. I found the travel brochures in her drawer. I'm sorry I doubted you." Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, tears falling freely. His voice, soft, cracked, honest, was like medicine. "I don't know how we fix this," he continued, "but I want to try. If you're still in Italy, please. Let me come." She called him back immediately. "You'll need a passport and good walking shoes," she said, smiling through tears. "We've got groves to see." 3 days later, Sarah waited at the Florence airport, scanning the crowd until she spotted him. Mark, suitcase in hand, wearing a linen shirt and a confused look. "I almost missed the connection," he said, breathless. "Didn't understand a word anyone said." "You made it," she whispered, hugging him tightly. "That's all that matters." Over the next week, they retraced the journey Sarah had once planned alone. They tasted wine with the Riccis, visited the ancestral church and strolled past olive trees under golden sunlight. No resentment. No pressure. Just a father and daughter rediscovering each other, and healing together. Back in Chicago a month later, Sarah stood at her father's side at a quiet birthday dinner. Just the 2 of them and a small cake with 61 candles. Diane wasn't there. Not because she hadn't been invited, but because Mark had needed time. "Things will take a while to fix," he admitted. "But at least now I know who you are, and what you did for me." Sarah smiled. "I did it because you deserved it, Dad. And because I deserved to stop apologizing for loving you." They clinked glasses. No grand party. No fancy banners. Just truth, peace, and a memory better than anything Sarah had once dreamed. Even when you're pushed out by the people who should support you most, stay true to your heart. Real love, honest, quiet, and loyal, has a way of finding its way back no matter how long it takes.